and for joining us for this high-level evening plenary of our STC. It's the third day of our Sustainable Development Conference. We are marking the Silver Jubilee this time. And this is the plenary that we're calling it 3.1 on the green financing for clean energy transition in Pakistan. Very pleasure and honored to be joined by the ambassador of Germany to Pakistan, Mr. Alfred Granas, country director, KfW, Mr. Sebastian Jacobi. We'll be shortly joined by Minister of State for Finance and Revenue, Ministry of Finance, Ms. Aisha Ghaus Pasha. And our distinguished panelists include Mr. Zafar Masood Saab, CEO, Bank of Punjab, Mr. Waqasul Hassan, CEO, Karandas, Pakistan, Mr. Ahmed Amar Yasir, Chief of Party PFAN, Abdul Hassan Kazmi, Lead Office of Sustainability, PepsiCo Pakistan, and Ms. Esther, she is the Head of Division Finance Sector Infrastructure, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, KfW Development Bank. She has joined online. Thank you so much for your valuable time and, of course, confirmation and being here. Before I formally begin the green financing plenary, we have a very short video as a tribute to one of our research fellow who has recently passed away. It's called Dr. Mahmood Khwaja. He's been an asset to STPI and had served STPI for more than 2 decades. Unfortunately, he's no more with us. So please join me in giving him a tribute for 5 minutes, and we'll begin formally with the plenary. So I may request the IT team to kindly take the video.
On 14th of November 1943, Naushera, a small town then in northwestern India, was blessed with a baby boy. His parents called him Mahmood, the praised one. Mahmood grew up to become Dr. Mahmood Khwaja, a global protector of environment and a bulwark against the spread of chemical pollutants. More than a quarter of a century ago, his vision could see what disaster is teaching us now.
Upright and bold person. He had his own principles, his own values, beliefs, which he followed very strictly. He was an accomplished researcher.
He would link results of his research to policy through recommendations, so much keen on sharing results of his toil that he would not wait.
On his deathbed, the message that he sent me, it was about his forthcoming publication, for which he wanted to make sure that it is uploaded on the web page.
An avid researcher drowned in the thought, but it would not stop him from helping administration taking executive decisions. Establishing negative impact of hazardous chemical on human health was his major contribution. He brought private sector together towards a shared realization that hazardous chemicals coming out of the industrial process has a cost, both monetary and non-monetary, which can keep us from achieving sustainable development goals.
Dr. Khwaja was at the forefront of informing the government about their responsibility towards the international conventions around hazardous chemicals. So whenever there was a turnover in the government, whenever the institutional memory was weak, he was there to remind the government of their responsibility.
His contribution in implementing Minamata Convention, demanding ban on use of mercury, is recognized globally. So much that President Arif Alvi, a dentist himself, would talk to him during official ceremonies to firm up a thing or two. His firmed-up research standards would not negate his honest and loving human side. The coin was fully valid on both sides. The person behind the persona was made up of pure silk. He would fill up balloons for his grandchildren and take them to the garden.
He was very friendly, almost to all the family members, to his brothers who are now have passed away, brothers, sisters, and other relatives as well. And he used to value the guidelines or some suggestions from the females, especially his better half, his wife, his sisters, his colleagues.
His genuine nature would win him friends among the acquaintances too.
He made an effort much more to be a friend to me than to be a father. That's something that was rare at that time. अब तो काफी कॉमन है, बट उस वक्त बहुत रेयर था कि आप रोब जमाने के बजाय आप दोस्ती का ताल्लुक रखें अपने बेटे के साथ. I owe him for that.
His wife is a witness of his honest and dedicated life. After his marriage, he never listened to anyone else, she says. He would use his institutional memory to the administration. At an annual retreat, the atmosphere was tense, and the mercury was high on stopping the use of mercury. Dr. Khwaja was expressing his disagreement vocally. An intellectual cul-de-sac, Brigadier Muhammad Yasin, stood up and assumed the mic.
Dr. Khwaja was expressing his disagreement very vocally. I got up and I said, वाह जनाब ख्वाजा जी, विजनरी तो हैं आप भी, भला एनवायरनमेंट और मरकरी अलग भी हुए हैं कभी, यही तो हाइपोथेसिस है आपका, फिर झगड़ा कौन सी बात का, आओ मिलके ये कहें अभी तो हम जवान हैं, अभी तो हम जवान हैं.
Mahmood is no more.
I still can't believe he's gone. Dr. Khwaja was one of our refined colleagues, a thorough gentleman and a very hard-working researcher.
May I also join others in conveying my deep condolences in Khwaja Mahmood, in the passing away of Khwaja Mahmood, who was such a rich resource person and a very good scholar.
He fades away for sure. His memory will always be young.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to formally begin with the plenary on green financing for clean energy transition. To begin with, I would like to invite the Honorable Ambassador of Germany to Pakistan, Mr. Alfred, for his special remarks. Please.
And dear, not yet here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And dear Executive Director, the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, distinguished guests, I'm very honored to be invited to provide a keynote address to this high-level plenary on green financing of the International Sustainable Development Conference organized by the SDPI, the most renowned think tank in the climate and energy sector in Pakistan. Let me congratulate SDPI for organizing this trailblazing conference already for the 25th time. I appreciate the enormous multiplication effect this conference has, not only in terms of guests joining us in person, but also virtually coming from more than 25 countries in South Asia and in other parts of the world. In that respect, I feel very honored to organize this high-level planning of our Pakistan Climate and Energy Partnership together with SDPI as strategic partner. So green finance is one of the most outstanding subjects in the partnership, which is the partnership is currently dealing with. And it is and will stay a core instrument to combat climate change at national and also international level. So why is it so important? First of all, it helps us in attracting private funding for the transition to a sustainable and climate-friendly economy. And secondly, green financing activates, ensures, and improves the sustainability of the banking sector and finance industry also in Pakistan. Therefore, it is a cornerstone in the fight against climate change. The STPI and our Pakistan-German Climate and Energy Partnership included these mechanisms in the framework of the Pakistani Network on Clean Energy Transition. June this year, first workshop on that subject was organized with the State Bank of Pakistan. The workshop assessed how to implement and improve the Pakistani green financing system and how that system could profit from the experience of Germany and the European Union. We see a unique opportunity for Pakistan to be at the forefront of establishing and benefiting from such a system that aims to equip better, us all better against the negative impacts of climate change. Part of this endeavor is our support to the establishment of the green banking guidelines by the State Bank that have been adopted in 2017 and can be considered a core element and first building block of the green financing system. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, let me also express my heartfelt sympathies for the people of Pakistan that suffered so tremendously from climate change related floods, the most devastating floods disaster in history caused by apocalyptic monsoons and also the record-breaking heat waves before. To compensate for floods, Germany provided until today around 108 million euro to Pakistan for flood-related relief and early recovery reconstruction processes. The further reaching and discussion joining to that, the discussion on loss and damages arising from climate change related disasters was a central subject during the COP27 and successfully negotiated by Pakistan as the chair of the G77 group of countries, encompassing development countries, and of course also reached through negotiating efforts, compromising willingness and commitment from the EU. And here also I would like to applaud or laud ourselves a little bit, Germany in the lead on that side. Thank you very much. But also the framework we're talking about here was discussed there, also the COP27 at the side event with the Pakistani Minister of Climate Change, Sheikh Rahman, and the German Minister for Economic Cooperation, Ms. Svenja Schulze. So just let me quote Ms. Rahman: Germany is bridging the gap between promises and action. Germany is the first champion of loss and damages. So we are honored by this appreciation, which comes with responsibilities for us, but also for Pakistan, for both sides. Because furthermore, as Germany, as the chair of the G7, launched the Global Shield Against Climate Risks with a seed capital of seed capital, because that's the idea behind that, of 170 million euro provided by Germany, and invited Pakistan to be one of the 7 pathfinder countries. Embedded in that shield also is the Global Risk Management Alliance, for which Germany provides 10 million euro. So let me explain a little bit the idea behind the Global Shield. It addresses current weaknesses in the financial protection structure in climate vulnerable economies like Pakistan. So what it would do is provide pre-arranged finances dispersed quickly and reliably before, if you can see disaster coming, or immediately after the disaster has happened. So that would expand instruments of financial protection for governments, communities, businesses, and households, and is therefore mitigating the impact of disasters. Germany is committed here to help stabilizing Pakistan's economy, making it more resilient, while safeguarding sustainable development and protecting lives and livelihoods. Having said that, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that climate risk assessment is of paramount importance. Consider the basis for the entire green financing system, the banking system, the insurance industry, and other financial instruments. And in that respect, I'd like to highlight that at least, that's really mind-blowing figures, 4 to 6,000 billion euro per year, which would be about 5% of the global GDP, would be needed to decarbonize the global economy and thus win the combat against climate change. And for raising these funds, the green transformation of the entire financial sector is paramount, because let's not kid ourselves, with those figures, no government or no public budget will be ever able to provide for that. So there is money in this world, and we need to mobilize this money, and this money can come from the private sector, but we need to equip the financial system and the banking sector for being able to provide for that. So today's high-level plenary will outline and explain the most important aspects for introducing and improving a green banking system also in Pakistan. So you might be aware that Germany was worldwide a pioneer combating climate change on a political level already in 1990. Only 1 year later, the first action plan on renewable energies was introduced and later adopted by more than 60 countries in a similar way. Germany continues being committed to combat climate change in cooperation with partners around the world. And in 2019, finally, climate change reached, I would also say, the #1 position of long-term priorities on the agenda of German politics. That year, Germany decided to step up its international cooperation and offer climate and energy partnerships to selected developing partner countries. So Pakistan was the first country with which Germany agreed on a partnership that manifested itself in a joint declaration on intent on the 10th of September 2021 in Berlin. So for Germany, Pakistan is of special interest because it's one of the countries worldwide most hit by climate change, and because its politics are still extremely engaged in the combat against climate change. So this combination, the unfortunate one and the fortunate one, makes us hope that our partnership here will also pave the way for other partnerships we have in the world. We would like to also engage in the world. So one thing is that the energy sector, which then of course play an important role rebuilding the economy and to become more climate resilient. So we are on the way, working towards hopefully also reaching a just energy transition. So with that, I would like to end wishing us all fruitful conference, fruitful panel discussions, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Excellency, Ambassador of Germany to Pakistan, for your remarks. And we are very honored that STPI's Network for Clean Energy Transition in Pakistan is partnered with the German Corporation on this initiative, and that is Climate Energy Partnership now. And one of the key successes and one of the key initiative that has been launched recently at COP27, we were able to hold the first event yesterday at RSDC on the Global Shield, Pakistan being the first recipient country of the initiative. So thank you so much for your remarks and the address. Moving on, I would like to request Mr. Sebastian Jacobi, he's a country director, KfW, for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Dear Ambassador Granas, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to give the opening remarks at this green financing workshop. Green financing is at the heart of what KfW is doing here in Pakistan on behalf of the German government. And we feel support in this regard is much needed. I think the figures are quite well known. Pakistan is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, while contributing less than 1% to global emissions. Loss and damages of the flood, which was also climate induced, are more than 30 billion US dollars. According to estimates, total investment needs for a response to Pakistan climate and development challenges between 2023 and 2030 amount to around $348 billion. Thereof 152 billion for adaptation, resilience, and 196 billion US dollars for decarbonization. So extremely high figures. I understand Pakistan is very much willing to tackle these issues and has also committed to increasing the share of renewable energies. For this, huge investments are necessary. So how can Pakistan secure the funding to tackle all these issues? From my point of view, resources for climate finance can be threefold. Domestic resources, resources from development partners, and resources from the capital markets. We all know, due to the current financial situation, domestic resources in Pakistan are limited. From a climate point of view, the recent removal of fuel subsidies is, however, a right step into energy transition. Now, when it comes to funding from development partners for energy transition and climate adaptation, a lot has been happening. And it was mentioned, at the COP, the Loss and Damage Fund was established, which I personally welcome. At the same time, based on the German initiative, the Global Shield was launched. It was also mentioned already, protecting countries against climate-related risks. And Pakistan is one of the first countries that has joined this initiative. Now, the German Development Corporation, KfW, GIZ, and BGR, has been providing more than 400 million euro in this regard. Last year, as it was mentioned, Germany and Pakistan have established the Climate and Energy Partnership to further support Pakistan in achieving its climate-related targets. KfW is financing hydropower, solar and substation projects. We are financing credit lines for solar home system and a TVET project to train technicians working in the renewable sector. In addition, we are funding afforestation measures under the Billion Tree program. Climate risk insurance is something the German Development Corporation is also looking into. And here there might also be room for private investors. Energy transition cannot work without involvement of and financing from the private sector. So how to tap into this source of funding? Most private people, companies, or institutional investors would not mind if they could act as philanthropists, but definitely seek a return for their investments that also reflects the risks they undergo. So attractive investments along with a conducive business environment and legal security are key. One instrument to facilitate investments from the international capital markets are green bonds. Green bonds are becoming increasingly popular. I'm saying this as a representative of an organization, KfW, that is one of the largest issuer of green bonds worldwide. 10 years ago, 2 billion euro were issued worldwide as green bonds. Today, it is more than 200 billion euro. For Pakistan, this is not an entirely new avenue, as WAPDA has already launched one green bond. I believe there is definitely potential for Pakistan in the medium term to tap the international capital markets through green bonds. The preparation of a green bond framework that sets the basis for the identification, selection, verification, and reporting of the projects eligible under the green bonds could be a next step. In any case, securing funding for energy transition and adaptation might be challenging, but a worthwhile endeavor. The German Development Corporation is definitely ready to support Pakistan in this regard, as we have been doing in the past 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sebastian, for your remarks. Now I would like to formally announce the launch of our recent report on green finance frontiers in Pakistan. The hard copies for the distinguished panelists have been placed at the front, but in the interest and in the care of the environment, we would like you all to download the soft copy, which is being displayed with the QR code in the right at the front of the hall, and also it's available on our website. With this, thank you so much to the Honorable Chief Guest for the remarks. I would like to invite Mr. Hartmut, the Coordinator, Pakistan German Climate and Energy Initiative, for his technical presentation on this book that we have launched today. Thank you so much.
So before a technical presentation, all the technical details had to be finalized. Now they are finalized. Honored Ambassador Dr. Grammers, dear SDPI, HINA, coordinators, dear participants of this green financing workshop. I'm very honored that as coordinator of the Pakistan German Climate and Energy Partnership, which was already pointed out, is the first of these partnerships. I can provide you with a technical presentation of these recommendations on green financing, which we formulated after an important workshop of the Network of Clean Energy Transition in cooperation with the Pakistan German Climate and Energy Partnership in June of this year. This was a workshop. At first, the Network of Clean Energy Transition is organized, supported by the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. So HINA and me have been together, the driving machines, to also take care of this workshop. This was a workshop together with the State Bank. And as we already heard, the European Commission and the European Union was there as well as Germany, in order to indeed show where in the green financing system we are in Europe, where we are in Germany, what we can learn from them, how Pakistan can be not only in the first place as having a climate and energy partnership, but also as in green financing system. And it seemed to be so important that directly after the workshop, we sat together and said, this is something we should provide on this year's important Sustainable Development Conference. And that's why we are here to really present this to you. And I think a lot was already said how important the green financing is. And I would like in my presentation to give you a few of the background data worldwide. Here you see already the figure of $5 trillion US, which are required for the combat against climate change worldwide, which is about 5% of the gross domestic product. And I just like to remember that more and more assets are indeed damaged by the effects, by the negative effects of climate change. When we were at the conference, we did not know what would happen in Pakistan shortly afterwards. When we decided to present this here, now after this monster flood, which we suffered this year, we know it much more, which costed more than $30 billion. And for climate finance, It's getting more and more important because more and more assets are hit by climate change. When we're thinking of risk, we shall factor in more and more climate change. When we are talking about climate finance, we should think of both of the mitigation of climate change, green energy transition, and also of the adaptation. We should take into consideration when financing adaptation, it is increasing exponentially. 2022 was really the year, the eye-opener for all the world, that climate change is happening, that Pakistan has experienced this great monster monsoon, that even many other parts of the world, like China heat wave, European heat wave, floodings in Australia happened. And what we heard on COP27, Pakistan can happen in a few years in all the countries of the world, making in danger more and more assets, meaning that green finance is getting more and more important. And we have to consider one thing as well. We have to invest in mitigation as well at the same time, because if we do not invest in this, the costs of the impact of climate change are increasing exponentially. And then this $5 trillion, which were the estimates of COP27, from there we received them, they will increase considerably afterwards. Now, to get a little bit more into the global details, into the initiatives in Pakistan, the State Bank already adopted the green banking guidelines with the support of the GIZ in 2017. In 2021, they adopted guidelines for the implementation of this green banking guidelines, and the International Finance Corporation and the HS Bank already started with a huge capacity building on this subject. Next slide, please. Sorry, a slide before, you were already fast. The technique was not 100%, but from my side, 99%. Now, when we look into the NDCs of Pakistan, we see sums which are much lower. We see a sum of $101 billion for the energy transition until 2030, and 166 billion until 2040, and a sum of 7 to 14 billion per year per adaptation. But we heard already higher figures from KfW. Sebastian, thank you very much. That's why I already have here the figure that new costs may provide much higher figures. And the flood disaster this year alone showed us that here in Pakistan, the costs, the damage of this flood disaster was almost 3 times higher as at that time when the NDCs were delivered the estimates of the yearly adaptation costs. So we are already much higher than there. And now next slide, please. Now I like very quickly to read you through the content of this report. Of course, it's too big. I won't read everything. It will last until 2 o'clock and something in the night, and I don't want to bore you. But you will be able to read it when you go through the book. So, of course, like every book, executive summary, introduction, then we present the overview of the current policy landscape for green financing in Pakistan, and then we provide the prospects of green finance in Pakistan. There we have at first the current green financing gap. Then we talk about the sources of green finance which are in place. Then we talk about common green finance instruments, and then most important, the challenges in the implementation of green finance in Pakistan. And from this, we come to the policy recommendations, which are all derived from these challenges. And we also provide a way forward how to really could establish a green financing system. I will very shortly come to this in this presentation as well. And very beautiful Annex 1 really provides all the challenges and provides for every challenge the key recommendations how to overcome these challenges. And we are for sure many years together in partnership on climate change between Germany and Pakistan to go on together. And then we also annex the key initiatives of selected commercial banks. So many banks already started with something like a green banking system, especially the multilateral, but also the bigger commercial banks of Pakistan. So coming to the, sorry, next slide, please, to the priority recommendations. The first one of the priority recommendations is the establishment and implementation of a full-fledged green financing system, the development of an official definition for green finance and green taxonomy, which was very much discussed on this workshop, awareness campaign to cater that caters all stakeholders, and then very central for the future, the climate risk assessment as basis of green financing needs, which factors really in the risk of climate change. Then the development of a robust system of accountability and transparency, the improvement of the financial legislation and governance, and capacity building and awareness raising, which should start in the financial industry. Next slide, please. The development of further tools on green finance, mainly for attracting more investments to the private sector, the development of de-risking mechanism to protect assets and stakeholders, increase local national sources of green finance, and broaden the scope of green banking and expand the role of banks and financial institutes. And what is indeed key is tapping private sector investment, plays a pivotal role. And as the Honorable Ambassador already pointed out, we cannot really go forward without tapping private investments. 80% of investment possibilities, potential is in private hand, only 20% in public hand. Next slide, please. Now, the way forward, very short, you will find it on a very beautiful figure in the report. Is a planning and pre-implementation phase, the first 6 to 12 months, then a testing and voluntary implementing phase, and then really a mandatory implementation after 2 years' time. And with this, I hope you have a little bit of appetite to read further, and we are very happy if you come back to us concerning questions to these recommendations, and if they have an effect that they can really kick off something. Thank you very much for the attention, and great, also technical things have provided very well.
Thank you so much, Hartmut. I would like to formally welcome State Minister for Finance and Revenue, Ms. Aisha Ghaus Pasha. Thank you so much, ma'am, for out of your busy time, you could join us for this really important plenary we are doing on green financing for clean energy transition in Pakistan. This is being done in collaboration with Pakistan-German Climate Initiative. We are honored to have guests from the German embassy here and the colleagues who have joined us and the stakeholders from Pakistan as well. So we have had some special remarks and opening remarks so far, just to recap, and we are about to formally begin with the panel discussion with our esteemed guests. And for that, I would like to hand over to my to a colleague, a friend, a specialist that I call, who else would have been here other than Kashmala Kakakil, being expert in the green finance and the climate finance. Thank you. There you are. Yeah.
Thank you, Hina. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to the guests. With that, I would like to request our panelists to join us on stage. May I please request Zafar Masood Saab, CEO of the Bank of Punjab, to join us. Waqasul Hassan Saab, CEO, Karandas. Ahmed Amar Saab, Chief of Party PFN. Syed Hassan Kazmi Saab, PepsiCo, Pakistan. And then we have Ms. Esther online, I believe, from the KfW Development Bank.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I will.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. So in an ideal world, we have the scientists telling us what the problem is. We have the politicians mending their ways, and we have the markets responding to it. However, in the words of our UN Secretary General, our governments are not only ignoring the problem, they're adding fuel to the fire. Given that reality, I'd just like to open up the conversation to the fact that it's not just the finance that's a problem, but then there are technical and political challenges that we're facing today globally. So I'll open up by talking about 3 challenges and 2 opportunities. And then I would like us all to contextualize that within what it means for Pakistan, because all of you represent very specific areas that currently are trying to make a little dent or a little change in our own little way. So obviously challenge number 1 is when we had our global Paris Agreement, monumental agreement where we had all 200 countries come together and sign an agreement where we all committed to reduce our pledges by X%. However, the reality is that we're all lagging behind, particularly our G20, where 78% of the emissions come from. We're not on track. Globally, we're not on track, and that's a problem. Secondly, we have about $500 billion annually going into subsidy to the fossil fuel industry. That's not small. We're actually moving in the opposite direction to the conversation we're trying to build over here. Thirdly, we have COVIDs, we have the Ukraine war, we have energy supply issues. These seem major today, but in the historical frame, these are all issues that will happen, they will crop up, but then as they say, the show must go on, which segues into my opportunities for where we are right now. Opportunity number 1 is that as per the World Energy Outlook, we know that now setting up and operationalizing a wind or an energy or a solar power plant is now cheaper than going for coal and fossil fuels. So that's good. Technology and R&D is going in the right way. And we're also having citizens hold governments accountable. We have about 2,000 lawsuits in which different individuals have actually gone to the courts to talk about the accountability that currently is not on the table. So with these giving a 30,000 feet view on the issues, I'd like to now come individually to one of you to give your thoughts on how that, given that sort of a context, where we are and where the islands of opportunities are. Waqas Saab, if I can start with you, given your role with Karandas, where you actually sit at the heart of helping SMEs and other entities access climate finance. Can you just help us understand where we are, what the issues are, and what the opportunities are? Thank you.
So thank you very much, Kishmala, for an excellent background and context. As a practitioner, I would talk about what our experience is and when we interact with the market and the opportunities, how they appear to us. So if we look at any indicator that you pick, obviously we are lagging, be it air quality. I mean, I was starting from my journey from Lahore, and the first thing that you have to see in the morning is that what's the fog status, and why you have to see this, because there is a serious air quality issue. You know, a major city of the country becomes dysfunctional for a few weeks every year. You know, there is a loss of economic potential and activity. But when I look at what solutions are being thought about, we just ran a challenge fund and we held our pitches on the air quality, and we want to provide concessional finance. I tell you, I was underwhelmed by the deals that come forward. So I think the first starting point, everybody understands that there is a problem, but we do not find enough. I work with private sector, so I would talk about private sector, and I won't comment on public sector, but maybe there's a fiscal constraint. They cannot anyways address all of those challenges. But in the private sector, you do not see enough solutions coming forward. Now, why don't they come forward? There is a possibility. I mean, there is some lack of innovation in Pakistan anyways, but one fundamental facility that does not exist in the country is early risk for these deals. Because lots of these deals require a spectrum of grant to concessional to equity to long-term finance, and then to even the working capital. So you do not have early patient capital which can de-risk these deals and bring them to a level where the institutional or other serious investors can put money into that. So I think that's one of the fundamental problems. Now, whether such institutions around the world exist which do that? Yes, many. Zafar Saab is sitting here. He has worked with, say, Infraco Asia. That's one such instrument funded by FCDO, and at the back end funded by several multilaterals who provide that facility at the regional level. But their deal size are much bigger, and they work at kind of regional or bigger ticket size solutions. If you look at who funds them, then you would find that governments fund or create such institutions themselves. So in Pakistan, if I ask anyone whether we have a facility like this in Pakistan, we do not have a single specialized green financing facility. Talking about instrument specific early de-risking facility is another thing, but we do not have a single green financing specialized facility in the country. So I'll just stop here. I mean, if you want to ask me more questions, I'll come in later. So that's.
Thank you very much. Let me then jump to Masood Saab. Is this right? Yeah. We heard of the green banking guidelines that State Bank has come up with, and we've heard of the sort of challenges that Waqas Saab has referred to. Given that you are at the heart of the matter when it comes to financing, what sort of challenges do you see, and how would you suggest we take that into consideration going forward?
Thank you, Kashmala. You see, although the earlier speakers have put the context perfectly about the global situation, I just want to highlight one figure which was not talked about. The contribution of Pakistan to the overall greenhouse gases is merely 0.9%. And then from there on, what one of the speakers talked about, we have committed to reduce it further by 50% by 2030. Costing is what, $101 billion, and then another $64 billion for another 10 years, 2040. These are substantial numbers for a country like Pakistan. And I think, and out of that, by the way, that 50% reduction, 35% of their funding is supposed to come from the international, it's conditional funding from international sources. And 15% we have to do it ourselves. Now the world is changing big time, and we've seen ourselves the kind of issues that the countries are facing across the globe, particularly in Europe. We have seen the pressure on Germany to look at reviving their coal plants. We've seen France, they are also looking at the nuclear plants to be revived back. These are all the realities of life, and we need to keep all those realities in mind. Now, given all of that, I think it should not be fair and it's also established fact that we are on the receiving end of global warming, to expect us to do things totally on our own, given our fiscal constraints as well. Minister is here, she'll talk about it. The external account challenges. I think the world has to step up and take more responsibility than what is expected from Pakistan. We'll do our bit. The banks are doing their bit. Kashmala, we talked about the green, banking guidelines, but State Bank has actually gone a step further, and they've rolled out environmental and social risk management framework, whereby the banks are required to implement that in 3 years. And in those 3 years, each borrower who will come for financing to the banks will be given a rating, and then that based on the rating, the pricing will be determined. So that piece has also been taken care of. But the fact of the matter is that there are constraints on the fiscal side. We've seen in the past that on the solar financing, there was a subsidy financing facility which was available. I think it's very unfair to expect government to continue with that, at least on the same terms. And if we don't, continue with that one, then the interest rates are at such a level that perhaps the whole viability becomes a bit of a question mark. Although Omar will talk about it later, we had a brief chat on this one. That perhaps if some kind of certainty, I'll take the advantage of Minister's presence here, is given on that front, then the financing company, the specialized banks will do the financing, but the conduit in the middle will be able to then take a position on what's required to be done. So I think that's the certainty piece on whether the fiscal support is there or not is very important. Then there are challenges on the external account as well. So the LCs, most of the equipment that we're talking about is sophisticated equipment, is not available locally. And the expectation is that our partners and friends outside Pakistan should be able to assist us in making sure that, we are well funded for that external financing requirements too. So this is the second important thing. The banks, as I said, and the regulator has already done their bit. They've already issued the guidelines which are required, which kind of gives the carrot and stick, following the carrot and stick policy on the banks, on the borrowers, will motivate them to come through and look at the compliance piece. But then I think the responsibility lies more on the rest of the world than Pakistan alone to achieve anything here. Another recommendation, taking the advantage of Minister's presence, I would suggest that we have 6 or 7 DFIs, and I know there is some kind of discussion going on at the Ministry of Finance level. There has been a discussion in the past as well. I think it's about time that we look at specialized, making them more into specialized areas. And perhaps, ESG is one area that these DFIs could be given a target for, or one of them could be given a mandate to pursue ESG compliance projects and expertise to be developed there. At the bank level, obviously there are constraints, and it all adds up to the cost. They lack expertise. We don't know the green financing that well. There are technicalities involved. And, from project financing perspective, it's always better that the experts do what they do better than the others. Relying on the commercial banks to do that may be a bit of a challenge. And that's the reason why we are not just seeing any activity or ramp up on that front.
Thank you so much, sir. Amar, before I come to you, I'd like to hear a multinational perspective from Kazmi Saab of PepsiCo. where do you stand on what is available in the market? Because as a potential stakeholder in whatever products are available in the market through the system that we're just discussing right now, what's the appetite like, and what's the absorptive capacity for the products that we're talking about over here?
So thank you so much, Kashmala, and thank you for inviting us to the forum. I think when we get all stakeholders involved, you get a dialogue going and the best solutions come to the table. Now, before I answer your question, I also wanted to, in the beginning, you set the context very beautifully, and you spoke about the challenge, in terms of how little progress has been made since the Paris Protocol was signed in 2015. But I also wanted to add some optimism, and what I'm reminded of is a similar challenge in 1950s. There's a book called Population Bomb, and written by Paul Ehrlich. And he spoke about the fact that with the population increasing, we won't have enough food to feed people. And he spoke about a doomsday scenario where how the earth would end. Now, what he had not factored in was innovation, because there came a Nobel Prize winner, Norman Borlaug, who through his innovation was able to quadruple the yield that you could get from the wheat crop per acre, almost 4 or 5 times. That was replicated across other crops, and we've crossed 8 billion, and that's the power of innovation. And there is so much innovation happening in the area of sustainability that there's a lot of optimism. Now, in terms of the appetite, I think one, with the recent events that have happened in the public space, there's a lot of awareness on the impact that this has from a livelihood perspective. Let's take Pakistan's example this year. With the floods, the wheat crop gets impacted, livelihoods get impacted. For a whole year, those farmers do not have access to a livelihood. So it's real, people are experiencing it. So in the public space, people understand what is the impact of it. The other thing is most organizations, I'm just bringing a private a multinational perspective, have announced global goals which are driven by UN SDG goals and stuff. And they're not committed on these goals just from a Europe or a US perspective. These are then trickled down to a country perspective. While there's appetite, there's public sympathy and a need to address it, there's a lot of innovation happening also. We made a great case from a loss perspective, loss fund, and I think that's the right thing in the right direction. But again, for us to signal to the rest of the world we're serious about it, policy is extremely important. If we don't have a wheeling policy, which is today implemented, we're not sending that we're serious about this whole thing. We can get all the funding, we can have business case, and that's the role where innovation, policy, and the market can come together. You've got to send a, we're serious about it, right? And not just try to play the sympathy card, because then your focus is going to be on mitigation and not resilience, climate resilience. So that's extremely important. So because goals are clear, there is public sympathy, we see a lot of appetite. And I'll give you the example of the textile industry. People used to say in Pakistan, certain health and safety and environmental standards cannot be implemented. Culturally, people do not understand this. As the export market expanded and the textile industry who were exporting, when those requirements were cascaded down to them, you walk into a textile industry which is exporting and you look at the standards that are implemented over there, it's just unbelievable. It's like you're walking into a factory that's operating in Europe and a non-exporting. So the incentive is there. There's a business case on clean energy. I think it's just that ensuring the right policies are enabled, because the market will come in and scale it up.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of positivity from the market. I'd like to then turn to the space where we're actually designing projects. And Amar takes the lead on that at BFAN, where they're actually trying to design these projects and to be able to access the funding opportunities that are available. Would you like to share with us similar optimism? And would you like to also reflect upon the fact that we're having policy challenges, or is there more to the mix?
So I will take the cue from Hassan's point. We should take an introvert look to this as well, albeit we have the presence of international community over here. We should put forth our case for climate diplomacy, loss and damage fund. Of course, that should be good. But there is some work that needs to be done on the ground over here as well. You more than anybody else know GCF is here for how many years, and the reasons we haven't been able to take it up. How many board meetings of GCF has happened over here in Pakistan. So I mean, there is certain lack of capacity and empathy to these causes over here in Pakistan as well. So we must take our case seriously at our home as well. For that purpose, there is a need to go from macro to micro level. When we say that we need $10 billion, $9.4 billion per year for clean energy transition, I mean, what does these $9.4 billion mean? We must break it down to project level transactions and see where we can solicit the interest. Green bonds have been mentioned. Of course, unless you have these kind of projects for which structured finance can happen, without that, I mean, you will never be able to access those international sources of finance as well. Moreover, I mean, although in this macroeconomic environment, talking about domestic sources of finance is rather something skeptical, but I still believe, I mean, we have a saving ratio of 3.6% of gross domestic product. That again is a sizable size for us to mobilize for our clean energy transition. With State Bank financing scheme, when we see the numbers, it was 3.5 years payback time. Even without that, and with the increase of tariff that we have without the subsidy, again, we don't see any number beyond 4.5 years, even without the subsidy. So my suggestion, my takeaway would be that, I mean, whatever the environment it is, we must build on the local resilience, the local market that we have in front of us. And we must try, first of all, come up with a solution that are internalized. And I am very confident that once we have that sort of a pipeline in place, there are many ears that are willing to hear our case, that are willing to plead to our case globally. I mean, we were not at all enthusiastic or optimistic about something of that sort happening a few days back, and that miracle has happened. So if we have done our work, I believe there would be external financing flows coming as well, if we are able to show our domestic will for that.
Thank you very much. So in addition to, it's not just a policy matter, it's also making sure we have the right project pipeline, which speaks to the local needs. Again, is a very critical point and a critical message that Amar is sharing. Esther, can you hear me? I would like to now turn to you. Do we have you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think this is a good moment to segue back to the international perspective on matters that are just being discussed right now in Pakistan, the challenges and the opportunities that you just heard from the panel. How would you like to chime in, and what additional angles would you like us to consider?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to join you on this panel today. I would like to give some impulses to the discussion, starting with the terminology, the taxonomy. What do we understand by green financing, basically? Because if you ask 5 people, you will probably get 10 answers what green financing is. You can have a look from the demand side, yeah, energy efficiency measures in household or in municipalities. You can have a view from a supply financing side in investing in solar panels, wind parks, etc. Or you can talk green financing when you refer to private leverage, private capital leveraging, green bonds, etc. Also, you can talk green financing when you say you want to financing SDG compatible value chain. For instance, somebody just talked about the textile industry. You can also talk green financing if you talk about conservation of biodiversity. You talk ocean, clean ocean initiatives, etc. And you can also talk about climate adaptation and climate mitigation measures in municipalities, insurance, Nat Cat schemes, etc. So one important thing from my side is to define what of all these measures do I want to tackle? What is it what I want to have in mind? And in that sense, have a strong focus on strategy and strong focus on NDCs and coherent NDCs throughout the strategy. This is one thing. And the other thing, and you know, I'm coming from KfW, I'm not sure if you know what the 3 letters stands for. We are the German Bank for Reconstruction, founded in 1948. Why I'm mentioning this? The German government uses KfW Bank. We are a state-owned bank supervised by the German authorities. If the government wants to foster certain specific program for the country, like energy efficiency in households or in municipalities. So what I'm trying to say, it is also important to have a proper vehicle to channel, let's say, grant funds or concessional funds, as somebody just mentioned on the panel. And from us to channel to other partners like private banks or financial institutions in general. And the third thing I would like to mention is that you will know that you have a proper regulatory framework, which is absolutely necessary to foster private investments, local and internationally. If investing in green measures is an economical decision. And if I will give you an example. If buying a fridge, which has a higher energy efficient level, is cheaper than buying a regular fridge, then the proper regulatory frameworks and policies have been in place. So it has to, we will only overcome, and that's my personal opinion, we will only overcome for a real transition if the decisions are based on an economic logic. And if it makes sense for people to invest in green measures. In order to that happen, of course, it is a big step and it's a long way, but it starts with a framework. It starts to invite local and international investors. It starts with proper channels, and it starts with schemes, let's say grant schemes, the proper incentives to go the way to finance in green measures. It doesn't matter how you define them, but it has to be an economical decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that perspective, an outsider's perspective on the fact that one needs to define as a country what green means to them and then designing the right financial instruments to be able to tap in the right markets. We heard about the domestic market, as well as development partners and the capital market that we can dip into. So the clarity needs to be around what area, what the larger strategy is, and how you actually then segue into various options that are available. With that, I'd like to open the floor for questions. We will do that for about 10 minutes. If there is any particular question. Identify who on the panel your question is for, and kindly keep it short so we can have more questions.
My question is from Mr. Kazmi Saab from PepsiCo. As you know that Pepsi has sponsored this conference, SDGs conference, and its main theme is climate change and to combat climate crisis. I was there at Sharm el-Sheikh and Ajay for COP27, which is also sponsored by Coca-Cola, the world's biggest plastic polluter, and Pepsi ranked the second. So my question that besides sponsoring these conferences, do Pepsi have a strategy, or what are you doing to stop the use of plastic in daily life, and especially bottling and packaging? Do you have a comprehensive strategy to combat with it? What's your take on it? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. I think, as I said earlier, the approach we have is to understand what the problem is and how do we move towards a solution versus doing something abrupt which will disrupt the economy. Now, if I specifically take the plastics question, I think the way business models were designed, and I'm talking about all industries, was a take, make, and throw model. Anything. You talk about water, you talk about fossil fuels, you don't care about what's happening, and that's how business models were designed. Our approach and universal approach is now moving towards circular model. And what does that circular model mean? That means take some responsibility to what happens during the life cycle of that product. And I'll give you an example what we've done in Pakistan, and extremely proud of it. And this is not just Pakistan, it's happening globally also, but we're the first organization to do this in Pakistan. One, there is no EPR in Pakistan, what we call the extended producer responsibility. So in a lot of countries, governments are holding organizations responsible for whatever they're putting out there. No EPR, but we are committed to collecting 100% of the plastic waste that it ends up because of the business that we've created. See, today we're collecting 40% of it, and we've signed up to scale it up in the next 2 years to 100%. There's a challenge around formalizing that sector and making sure it's done in a way which is clean. The other thing we've done is when I spoke about circular, and it has stacked wins for Pakistan. We're not using virgin raw materials, which are imported into the country, to make this water. We are now using the same plastic, and that's where the power of innovation and entrepreneurs comes in. In Pakistan, once we created a demand, there was already someone available who was willing to put the money in that technology, bring it to Pakistan. With the support of that, we have a bottle in Pakistan which is made out of recycled PET. It's launched in Karachi. We're still getting some learnings because consumer awareness be low end. And guess what? We have to pay a premium for it. It's not like it's eating into our bottom line. And I would like to come back to the comment that was made earlier on economic sense. Absolutely, everything does need to make economic sense. But guess what? We'll have to change our lens. If we are going to use the conventional lens of an IRR and what makes sense financially, guess what? 60%, a large portion of projects would not make sense. What we do in PepsiCo, One, we have a different hurdle rate when it comes to investing in these projects. Okay? So we've raised billions of dollars in green bonding, but internal criteria is if a conventional project would require this much return, when I'm talking about a green project, I'm okay to live with even lesser returns because we factor in the loss. And I'll give you an example on it. Sorry, I'm taking too long, but it's a question where, I think it'll help guide people on how this transition will happen. I'll give you a small example. Today, we buy potatoes in Pakistan. We know the impact of climate is my sowing window and my harvesting window is getting smaller and smaller. If I don't give an incentive to the farmer today to do regenerative agriculture, guess what? In 10 years' time, my business might just be half because I won't have potatoes to source, right? So what you have to factor in is the loss that you would create. So a conventional lens might not make sense. You'll have to live with lesser returns, but when you factor in the loss, it would make sense. So that's why I'm happy paying extra to farmers who do regenerative agriculture, because it's good for, from a business perspective in the long term. And it's also good from a climate perspective. It's a stacked win. So I think that approach, and I mean, as we, crystallize green financing guidelines, I think that's extremely important on what different lens can we use and how much risk appetite can we build if we factor in the loss or the lost opportunity of inaction.
Thank you very much for that. I'm afraid we have time just for one more question right at the front. Sure.
As we know that my name is Adnan, Division of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, based in Peshawar. Okay, as we know that the cost of the electricity is really shooting up. This is Madam for you. And we don't have, and the cost of solars are also shooting up now, because 1 kVA is nearly 2 lakh rupees now. And a commoner person cannot afford to have a solar. So my question will be to you, and I have taken up this matter many times to the provincial and the federal government, that rather than spending so much money on so many things, why don't you subsidize the solar system in Pakistan, make it up half of it in such a manner that everybody at house and offices, we can put solars, because solar is used to cost 70,000, now it's 200,000 rupees per kVA. So I think if you give subsidies on that, that's not going to cost the government a fortune, but that can help the people at home and the offices to put less burden on the water. So this is one thing we can look into it. And the second is that Pakistan has a lot of garbage and a lot of wastage. And we are very happy to see one road in Islamabad which is made of plastic. Why can't we have a policy of a proper recycling system in every main city of Pakistan, where we just have 3 boxes, the paper, the ink, and the plastic, and we educate and we have a opinion on that. So we can recycle this thing, and then we can produce electricity to some extent. So for all those areas where we cannot have electricity still now, and they have a huge load shedding in the suburban area of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so we can go on to that line. The third one is this, that the hydro potential of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is 45,000 megawatt. If we put the turbines on this fall of the water which is coming from the Himalayas, we are wasting those water. We can look into that potential with a highly subsidized investment project. We can bring the investors over there and ask them to have a small turbines where they can produce and localize and provide the electricity to the local areas. So I think these are the things we can look into it, because the SAARC region has a potential of 250,000 megawatt hydroelectricity. I mean, the mainly is Nepal, and then Pakistan has a Khyber Pakhtunkhwa 45,000. I think we have to change our mindset. We have to think larger now, because as we are living in the SAARC country, and I was a member of the SAARC chamber for 4 years, like executive member, and I have been advocating it everywhere when I had my presentation from Nepal, India, and everywhere. I think the time has come that we have to think much bigger. bigger in such a manner that we should shun our differences, whatever we have with our neighboring countries, and we should think about economics now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adnan sir. Madam, before you answer this, I think it's a good opportunity where I invite you to close the session as well, in which you will also respond to some of the questions that have been raised here, but primarily to help us conclude the session based on the various recommendations that you've heard from the panel. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, let me start by saying Assalamu alaikum to everyone and apologizing for coming a little late because these are full days for us and our meetings go on, and my apologies for not being here on time. Now, to talk about this, and thank you for inviting me on this important topic. I've heard the panelists, some very good suggestions have been put forward as well, some good discussion on some of the challenges and opportunities that exist, some good presentation of what green financing really means. And I'll be candid in my admission that we as a nation have really not really focused on these areas the way we should have historically, despite the fact that the State Bank of Pakistan has issued its guidelines and has, issued certain, details and manuals and so on and so forth. We're not where we should be as a nation. But the opportunity in all of this is that what the country has gone through in 2022, because of the floods, because of the catastrophic nature of the floods, because of the kind of disaster that has been brought down by this flood, it is a wake-up call for us also. And I think it's not just a wake-up call for the country, the government, it should be a wake-up call for all of Pakistan and for the global community as well. Because as my colleague here from Bank of Punjab indicated to you, that with 0.9% global emission, we are the 8th most adversely affected country in this world. We have gone through floods in 2010, in recent past. We went through floods in 2011. We went through floods in 2014. Now we have gone through floods in 2022. So I'm sorry to state, these are not going away anywhere. And it's high time that Pakistan understands that we may not be the big emitters. We may not do very much that we can do to mitigate emission. We have to be a nation which has to adapt to this. Whether we do it or not, whether we contribute to it or not, because of global emissions, we will be at the wrong end and the receiving end. And it is about very strongly about climate justice that we should be talking about. It's not just Pakistan. When we are at the forefront at this point of time, it will be so many other countries affected. We are going to go through this. And if the emitters are not realizing that asking us to mitigate climate adverse things, we will. We are committed, as has already been highlighted, 50% reduction and so on and so forth. But is this going to really make a difference in the global context? I'm afraid not. We are going to put in our commitment, and we stand committed. We will reduce it. You're talking about hydro, we're talking about solar, we're talking about renewable energy. We are committed that we are going to make it 60% by 2030, inshallah, if all going well. We will talk about renewable. We are already talking about 10,000 megawatt of solar energy. We're talking about hydro projects that you're talking about. We are taking that seriously. We also want to now go ahead and implement a very strong conservation program for energy, which we should have done earlier, but we are now going to do so. So we are going to play our role in mitigating it. But given the overall macroeconomic conditions that the global community is going through, look at what we are facing. We are facing, this is time when the global economy is going through recession. There are constraints on our exports, the potential of us increasing our exports and earning dollars. There are constraints on our accessing capital markets because there are too many countries already there. There are limits to how much we can access multilateral agencies. They are already saying there are too many demands across the globe. So what are countries like us going to do? I want to first emphasize, I'm not saying that we should not be playing our role. We should be playing our role, both in terms of organizing a house, in terms of raising more resources so that we can finance mitigation, as well as adapting to climate changes, bring in the research and technologies, bring in the kind of better reconstruction, the floods that we've just gone through. We're at the stage of rehabilitating and reconstructing. Our reconstruction has to be more climate sensitive. We need to sensitize ourselves and make everything more climate sensitive. We want to do this and we will be taking the steps forward. But the point that I'm trying to make is that alone, the kind of money that is involved, the country is in a squeeze, and not only us, some other countries which are very badly affected are in this squeeze. So what one is trying to say is that when we are talking about complying with SDGs, and we are talking about us getting our house in order, we are committed, we will go forward. Why? Because we've just experienced it. We've learned a lesson the hard way. We will inshallah comply. But the point I'm trying to make through this, the platform, is that there are others who have to understand also across the globe how they may not have been affected just now or previously, but look at the future, how their emissions are going to affect some of the countries. And let me also say, it's not just pure economics that we are talking about, that a country like Pakistan has gone through a $30 billion loss because of the floods. And we may need $30 billion loss, and we may need $15 billion to fully rehabilitate and reconstruct. Of course, not in a year, but in some over the years. It's not just about the economics. It's the human catastrophe part which the world also has to recognize. And let me quote you one statistics, which is not my brainchild. It's there floated by the international agencies. We had a situation during this flood when we had 600,000 expecting mothers in open sky. And in the month of September, we had a situation where 75,000 deliveries were made in open conditions. This is what we are doing to the world. It's not just plain economics, it's humanity. It's human catastrophe that we are talking about. So let not only us get up and wake up after this, the global community should also realize what the global world and what humanity is being put through because of their doings also. And I think this whole green financing thing, yes, we should open up new avenues. I have heard Karan Das, I've also heard Bank of Punjab, I have heard others, and I'm all ears for you all. Tell us, and we are also already putting up a strategy. The State Bank has already done what it needs to do. They need to do more. We in the finance division also want to do more. We already have a green financing unit. We are going to really rejuvenate it and really make it work harder. We will put in our bit in it. Come and help us out with it. But when you're talking about loans to be taken to refinance climate adaptation, what are the indebted countries going to do? Some of the countries who are adversely affected by climate change and who are really in need of green financing, are they in the position to take more loans to adapt? Whose responsibility is it? Can we afford it? Whose responsibility is it? Can we not have these nations growing up and realizing that this is not what they need to be putting the developing world through. So my plea, and let me again reiterate, we are not going back. We are affected. We've been hurt badly. We are moving forward. We are going to put in right strategies above any, politics, about any, and so on and so forth. We want to move forward. We are committed and we are putting together a package, already working on it. But we are, through the aegis of this forum, I also want to emphasize that we will do our work, but the global community also needs to do their work. UNESCAP is here. They are here. I see multilateral agencies. I see bilateral agencies. I see international community participating. And let us be a voice here in, in pleading out to the global community what the consequences of all of this is. Today it's us, tomorrow it may be someone else. Why put humanity through it? This is not just economics, developed world versus developing world, it's humans. And those who are the developed countries who have the ability to move forward, they have more of a responsibility on the economic side. They have more of a responsibility on the human side as well. Come and help us in this. Stop about talking about loans to finance all these things. We need to do it, help us out. So let's raise our voices together and move forward. What I will do is that we are already doing this in the finance department division. We are going to after all of this, particularly after COP27, we find ourselves really on the fifth gear as far as this is concerned. We are going to do this. We're going to put in the legislative framework. We're going to put in the institutional framework. We're going to put in whatever mechanisms it's required for. We want the corporate sector. We want the public sector. We want the public of Pakistan in general, because their contribution will be through conservation, promoting conservation, and we want to do our bit also. So let's join in and let's ask the global community to also come forward and take this more seriously, because it deserves to be taken more seriously. The problem ain't going away, as if I can use that expression. It's here to stay, and we will have to live in it. And let's do something about it. I stand committed, and we'll get in touch with all of you in finalizing what needs to be done and taking it forward. Thank you. Yes.
So, taking the cue from the minister and the assurances that we've got from her, let me just try and make something positive out of this session. Let me offer Sebastian to work with us, and perhaps I'll offer Karandas to come with us as well. Let's talk about doing a sovereign green bond. Let's talk about it. We'll work with you. We, by the way, just won the best corporate finance banking award in the fixed income, but we don't have the expertise on the green financing piece internationally. So why don't you bring that on the table? And of course, some money as well. But we'll work with you, we'll work together, we'll go to the minister as well, we'll engage the government. Let's take something positive out of the session today.
I wanted to share with you that from my board and from our management, we are committed to set up, if Kashmala or others, they outpace us is another matter, but the first specialized green financing development finance institution in Pakistan. So we're looking forward to these partnerships.
And you have our offer already on the table that we would like to be part with you on this.
I have
on the equity side.
Thank you. Not that.
On that very positive note, I would like to thank you all for an extremely enlightening and positive conversation. Thank you, Madam, so much for your passionate speech, as well as the reality where responsibilities within as well as outside, given that climate change is something that doesn't know borders. With that, I'd like to hand over back to Hina for her vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Kashmala. Thank you so much for the great moderation. Thank you so much to the esteemed panelists Dr. Aisha Ghosh, our special guest, Ambassador of Germany to Pakistan, Mr. Sebastian Hartmut, Safar Saab, the CEO, Karandaz, Akasul Hassan, Amar Saab, and from PepsiCo. Thank you so much. It has been a great discussion, and I think it closed up with a very positive note, and that is the purpose of what we are building capacity on that. And I think the screens on both sides show the launch of Green Finance Frontiers report that I would request the panelists to please hold while we are taking the group photo. And then my team will escort everybody for a dinner. So please do stay back. And I would request the photographers to please move forward. My team, I would also request the Ambassador of Germany to Pakistan to please come forward for the group photo, Mr. Sebastian or colleagues, the Deputy Executive Director, Dr. Sajid Amin, or Chairperson, Board of Governors, Shafkat Kakakhel Saab, to please come forward for the group photo. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the audience for joining.